Hi, I'm Zanzi. Welcome to another episode of Farmers Inside Track. My name is Patricia Tembo, your host. And today we have a farmer mentor and she'll introduce herself. Welcome to Farmers Inside Track.
Hello everyone, so I'm Liane Erasmus. I grew up on a farm. Since I was very little, I had the privilege to farm with my parents and with my grandparents and to experience their world of farming and how they see the farming world. So I grew up in Rustenburg, just outside of Rustenburg on a farm, and I studied at the University of the Free State. So I went to primary school and high school in Rustenburg, and then I ended up at the University of the Free State. So it was quite far from home, but luckily I had a coming sister-in-law that was already there. I studied agricultural science and animal science and grassland science, and then after that I did a freelance year just doing what I loved on the farm. And at the end of that year, I actually started in agricultural research, regenerative agricultural research. So that's my story. I've been in the research world for almost 5 years now, working with a wonderful team and enjoying what I'm learning every day.
That's so amazing. And I think on the topic of regenerative agriculture, you are someone who's very well knowledgeable in that area. And I think it'll be great, for our farmers who are listening who may not even have an understanding of the concept and how it's applicable and why farming systems should shift toward those practices. Maybe give a brief explanation of what regenerative agriculture looks like in South Africa, because it can be like a far-fetched thing where people are like, okay, no, that's like a American thing or South American thing. But like, what does that look like in South Africa and for you?
So on the farm, I grew up on a farm, especially with the livestock part, that you have to spare for the winter. So there was sort of a camp structure in place and planning of how the cattle move over the land, and you have to utilize one piece of land and leave a bit for winter. So that was the bottom basics of how I learned to farm. So when it comes to regenerative agriculture, I actually got introduced to the term when I started working on the research team with ASIC Research. So then I got to know the concept, what it is about, and it started more on the crop farming side. So where farmers was focused on soil health and how they can use nature to work for them on their farms. And that is, I think, when I have to sum it up, that is in my words, what regenerative farming is about, is farming with nature and see how it happens in nature and mimicking that in your system and in your practices. So I think it boils down to building up and not breaking down. See what nature provides and how you can use that to work for you on your own farm, because it's for free. So yes, regenerative farming is just leaving something behind and not destroying as you go forward.
The concept of regenerative farming and agriculture is so beautiful, like working in harmony with nature. And I suppose in that case, it requires less input, which of course a farmer would be happy to hear, like, spending less on like costs that come with it. So Amani, with your production, what challenges have you experienced when it comes to regenerative farming, maybe in adopting it, and in a country that's more like leaning toward conventional agricultural practices? What are some of the challenges that you've had with adopting regenerative farming, and how did you navigate them?
What I've learned is that there's not a recipe that works for everyone. So it's very context driven. So every farmer has special challenges on their own farm and in their own environment with the climate they have. And that's very important to acknowledge that. So it's not a one size fits all. So I think it happens with that light bulb that went on in you as a farmer. So you became aware of the fact that there's a different way of farming. And that way of farming is gonna look into a longer term of regeneration and leaving something for the next generations to come. And when that comes on, and when you accept and acknowledge that fact, I think you stand before a road that splits and you have to make the choice on which one are you going down. Are you going down the conventional way, or are you going to go down the regenerative way, although you don't know how it's gonna look every step? Because as we explore, we do find things that we don't always have the answers for. And we have to realize there's not a recipe for doing regenerative agriculture. You have to take your farm and your scenario and see how can you implement and how can you make it work in a way that is still enjoyable, that farming is still enjoyable for you. So the challenges I have experienced is just our normal, how our veld looks. It's really, we have valleys and we have rivers and we have not too much flat areas, but me as a livestock farmer wanting to high density graze my veld, there was challenges of just getting the animals adapted firstly to that type of system. Suddenly my cows, let's say the 100 cows, they could have roamed wherever they'd like to. And now I put them into a smaller camp for just 1 or 2 days, and then I moved them, and then I moved them. So the animals had to adapt. I had to overcome the challenge of choosing the specific animals that still performs in the system. When it comes to the basics of moving fences, using electrical fences to keep cattle in, the obstacle there is the environment.
Yeah.
It's really tough. So my guy that's working with me, I always tell him when the neighbor is looking over the fence asking what we are doing while we are walking with 20 or 50 droppers down the mountain, they just smile and wave because doesn't know what we are working towards. And that's important. So we have a focus point and we have a goal, and that is to manage our lands well and to graze the lands well in order to sustain more animals over time. It doesn't always make sense in that moment as well, while you are working and sweating up and down the hills, tripping over rocks, sometimes maybe breaking ankles or ankles. You have to keep your eyes on what you're working towards. So the challenges was it's not always smooth sailing. There's really things you have to overcome, not physically, but in your mind as well. If you've already chosen that it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But if you have made a choice that I believe in the system, then you will make it work. And then even though there's an obstacle on your road and you don't have to answer directly or on that moment, you must be willing to be humble and to adapt and to maybe just struggle a bit with that and see how you can overcome that. So the challenges financially wasn't that big for us as cattle farmers or as livestock farmers. The inputs, we more or less had all the infrastructure. There was a bit of putting up new permanent fences, but in between we just had to buy the electrical fences. We had to make more water points. That was also a struggle. It's nice when you have water on the flat areas, but taking that up the mountain again, you have to get bigger pumps, you have to build pipelines. So that was just some of the basic challenges we experienced in terms of infrastructure, in terms of animals. And management did become a factor. We had to get a guy that's willing to buy into the vision of why we want to graze the cattle suddenly in this way on the farm. So it did become easier to check on the cattle, where it always took about half of a day to see all the cattle. Now it takes an hour or two to see all the cattle. So everything is now very specific to us as cattle farmers and cattle farming. So crop farmers is going to have different challenges. But for me, in my context, that is more or less the challenges I had. And I think one other point is the family challenge. I had to convince my father and my mother as well. My mother is always, she's soft and tender, but so she understood from the beginning. But my father, he was looking at me and like, you're asking me to put up new pipelines and new tanks and new water holes and putting up some more fences and more fences. And we just had to work on the communication and the relationship on that side. So there's a family challenge as well. Yeah. But if you just keep it open and you communicate in an honest way to make sure everyone understands, then you will overcome that one as well.
Thanks, Liane. I think to wrap up the conversation, it sounds like environmental sustainability is just as important to you as like productivity and finding that balance with regenerative farming. I think a lot of our farmers are probably curious now, because this is something I can adopt while maintaining the profitability of my business. Because at the end of the day, you're farming for an income and you don't want to jeopardize that. So I think maybe for new farmers coming in and those who are already farming, what your experience has been, in terms of balancing the financial aspects with the environmental aspects of it.
So if finances is a challenge, take it step by step. The money is not going to rain on you out of nowhere. So it takes work to get there. And I think a lot of times I got discouraged. I wanted to see the things happening now, and it must happen it should have happened yesterday. So I was a bit in a hurry of getting everything done. But in the process, I learned that we have to be adaptable in all situations, because that's just going to make the process easier of moving towards a regenerative system. So being adaptable is really a key characteristic I can say that one should have, and a young farmer should have.
Yeah.
Just be patient with the process. So it's not going to happen overnight. You'll have to put in the work. Even though you can't have the best of everything tomorrow, just do what you can do now and tomorrow with the resources you have. And don't get discouraged if you are feeling that you are the only one standing on that point of view or towards that practices. Don't mind the opinions of the world around you. If you have a vision, if you have a change of heart of why you wanted to start regenerative agriculture, hold on to that, because that's going to encourage you to keep on going and to keep going forward, despite the things and the opinions that people have around you. So just take what you have, implement it and use it as best as you can. And then over time, you would find that you didn't give out in a manner that drained you financially and personally. But if you just give it time and you're trying to stay patient, you're going to move bit by bit. So your finance is going to generate a bit of more income. You're going to generate a bit more smoother like practices, implementing the practices. And again, the financial part and then the practice side. So if you feel like you're standing alone, just make sure you know what you are chasing after. And if you stand on that, then you will be okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And it does seem from, the journey you've experienced up well that it is rewarding at the end of the day. So thank you so much, Liane, for being our farmer mentor and just sharing a little bit about regenerative farming. I know there's a whole lot to still go into, but thank you so much for joining us on Farmers Inside Track.